most people are familiar with Bitcoin and maybe the sort of speculative aspects around tokens and blockchains. There's another side to the story, which is sort of what I would call the productive side of blockchains, which I'm part of and a lot of entrepreneurs are part of. And I wanted to write a book that was for the general reader, sort of without using tech jargon and sort of explaining things with examples and stories that made the case for the productive side of blockchains. And so the book starts, the sort of first part of the book walks through the history of the internet, and with a particular focus on sort of the sort of early modern internet in the 90s, where I argue that it was an internet that was governed by systems that were democratically controlled, that were open. So this is the protocols like TCP/IP and HTTP for the web and email. And so most of when people connected to websites and creators and entrepreneurs, they did so directly. And that, I believe that created sort of this massive wave of innovation, of creativity in the 90s and 2000s. And then in the next section, I talk about the 2000s, which I was part of as an entrepreneur. People call that the Web 2 era. They also called it the read-write era. That's where the read-write comes from. This is a common term people would use to describe those two eras. And in that era, so sort of in the 90s, you had most of the websites that you used were kind of passive. Like you would go and it was sort of like a brochure and you would read stuff. And there was some clicking and submitting stuff. But for the most part, the 90s era was about consuming information. And it sort of democratized the consumption of information, hence the term read era that sort of analogized to like a hard drive where you're reading the hard drive. And then in the 2000s, after the crash, like this is when I started my first company, it was sort of the Web 2 movement, the read-write movement. There were entrepreneurs who said, hey, the internet can be more than just this kind of consumption system. It can also democratize publishing. And so that was the beginning of blogging and social media. And of course, we all know today, you fast forward and everyone's on social media and posting. And so that dream was realized. And I think it had a lot of positive effects, including the fact that you now have 5 billion people who are sort of first-class participants in the internet and use free services, and there's lots of good things about the technology industry. But my kind of core argument is that in that process, we also handed over control to a very small set of large companies who run these services. So today, the top 5 internet companies control something on the order of 95% of the money and the traffic on the internet. And I think we can talk more about artificial intelligence at some point, but I think artificial intelligence is very important and powerful, but is very likely to even further accelerate that consolidation. And then the next part of the book, I argue that blockchains provide a new way to create internet services that can help reverse that consolidation. And that essentially you can create, anything you can create using sort of a corporate model or a protocol model. In the past eras, you can create using a blockchain model. And I argue that it kind of combines all of the societal benefits of the early protocol models of the 90s with a lot of the advanced modern functionality of corporate networks. And then in the last section of the book, I go through, because sometimes people say, like, what problems do blockchain solve? They sort of say, be specific. So I go through 7 very specific areas. Finance, social networking, games, AI, a bunch of different areas, and talk very specifically about services that exist or are being built using this blockchain model. And so the core argument is it's sort of a tour through the history of the internet with a lens, like a focus on sort of how power and money work on the internet and how it became consolidated, and how I hope that we can sort of reverse that consolidation. And in the end, I'm trying to show this other side of the blockchain movement, the part that's, if you FTX and, all of the kind of speculation and meme coins that I think people are very familiar with. There's this other side that I'm part of, maybe some of you are part of, tens of thousands of entrepreneurs are part of, and I felt like there wasn't a book that really kind of told their story.